Viktor Yahun, military and public figure, Reserve Major General of the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, Deputy Head of the SBU in 2014 to 2015, and Director of the Security Sector Reform Agency, is joining our broadcast. Victoria Nikolaevna, we are glad to welcome you, and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Good afternoon, town. Victoria.
Nikolaevich, well, let's start by figuring out just how difficult the situation really is. We're dealing with the issue of Ukraine not only having air defense systems, as we understand, but also, accordingly, missiles for them, as we can see. According to various media reports citing the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, this was being discussed at the NATO Summit. They have finally managed to reach agreements on the supply of these PAC-3 missiles, which will allow us to feel safer when Russia uses ballistic missiles to attack peaceful Ukrainian cities. So, regarding the resolution of this issue, Viktor Nikolaevich, is it really that complicated?
Well, we need to understand that Ukraine is in a completely different position today than it was a year or two ago. If previously at NATO summits, the main topics of discussion were how much more help Ukraine needed, what to do with it, whether to accept it or not, another invitation, another confirmation of the invitation, and so on, now the conversation is about what contribution Ukraine itself can make to the security of the alliance. Indeed, the main outcome of the summit in Ankara is that Ukraine is finally ceasing to be solely a recipient of military aid. It is becoming part of the European defense industry and one of the key producers of modern weaponry. The statement by the Minister of Foreign Affairs is especially telling. Andriy Sehi about finalizing the agreement on the production of anti-ballistic systems with the participation of, including Ukrainian industry. We're really talking not just about supplying Patriot systems, but about transferring technology and creating production capacities, which means a fundamentally new level of trust between the allies. I understand that this is all a very distant prospect, because the issue here isn't about international agreements. That, as I understand it, is basically already settled, but about licenses and setting up production. It's about technologies, about what we can manufacture, what we can simply assemble, and what we can get from there. So, in terms of scaling up, I think that first and foremost, production will not be set up in Ukraine, but rather in Germany and Poland, most likely. But the main thing here is the fundamental agreement. In other words, we've moved to a completely different level. We're no longer just receiving weapons in a box. We're becoming a technological system. The second fundamental point concerns the use of Ukrainian long-range weapons, which you already mentioned. Sagiba stated that Ukraine no longer needs anyone's permission to strike legitimate military targets on Russian territory with its own means of destruction. And this means the end of the period of political restrictions, when Western partners determined the acceptable boundaries for the use of weapons. Now, Ukraine is acting within its right to self-defense, as provided by Article 51 of the UN Charter. Even the Germans have already said that there's no point in giving us Taurus missiles, because we've reached a level where we have equivalents, and are basically fully replacing the Taurus with our own production. What's important to understand is that this does not mean unlimited escalation. Ukraine still strikes exclusively at military targets and facilities that support Russian aggression, but the strategic initiative is gradually shifting to us. Strikes on Russian military infrastructure have already become a crucial element in deterring the aggressor, forcing Moscow to allocate forces and resources to defend its own rear. This is also a very important conclusion for NATO. The alliance has seen that Ukraine is not just a country in need of protection, but also a nation with unique combat experience, modern drone technologies, electronic warfare capabilities, and experience in conducting high-intensity warfare. And that's exactly why Ukraine is now becoming a full-fledged element, as I mentioned, of the new architecture of European security. Not just an object of support, but a full-fledged producer and user. Strategically speaking, the NATO summit in Turkey showed that, most importantly, Ukraine is already integrating into NATO, not only politically, but also technologically, industrially, and militarily. And this process, as I understand it, is now practically irreversible.
Viktor Nikolaevich, let's talk about the possible, not forecasts, but let's say different opinions regarding what this production might look like in terms of complexity. I mean, patriots, so that we have a greater ability to defend ourselves from the ballistic missiles of the aggressor country. Establishing the production of interceptor missiles for the Patriot system in Ukraine will be a complex and lengthy process. And as Bloomberg writes, it will not affect the course of the current war. At present, the advanced PAC-3 missiles are produced only by the US and Japan, and the key components are supplied exclusively by Boeing. In addition, the future plant could become a priority target for Russian strikes. That's why experts do not rule out placing the facilities outside of Ukraine, which, in principle, is exactly what we were just talking about. Analysts emphasize that even if the project is launched, the main problem will remain the creation of a supplier network and the transfer of classified technologies. Viktor Nikolaevich, to what extent can we agree with this opinion? Lately, I have to admit, when I read these, not so positive reports from Western media, I think, well, maybe it won't be difficult, or maybe it actually will be difficult. Obviously, this is a complicated situation, but if we're already talking about something, making some kind of agreements, then most likely there are certain, let's say, procedures in place that will make it possible to carry it out. As they say, this deal regarding missiles and air defense systems. Well, obviously, as we just mentioned, as you said, if production does happen, most likely it won't be on Ukrainian territory. Although, of course, it's still too early to make predictions about that, most likely. But right now, we're just modeling the situation with you. Viktor Nikolaevich, what do you think about these kinds of opinions? From Bloomberg?
Well, you have to understand that to some extent, they're actually right. This is a very serious type of production, manufacturing, that takes place in special facilities, rooms that are filtered down to the level of microbes. Because when you're assembling missiles of this caliber, they're not only expensive, but also extremely complex in their production process. And it's a clean manufacturing process. When we strike the enemy, what we're really trying to destroy is not so much the missile depots or anything like that, but specifically those technical lines where it's extremely difficult to restore the cleanliness of production. That's why, really, all of this is very complicated. It's hard to hide, hard for Ukraine to cover up this kind of production. Maybe, yes, they could build some underground workshops, dig down dozens of meters, either into the ground or in the Carpathians, into the rocks, but all of that is very expensive and takes a long time. I think, most likely, that at the initial stages, we'll just be working with major key points, where the assembly happens at the final stage, maybe the loading or fueling of these missiles. So basically, to get to the point where instead of delivering a fully assembled missile, we deliver some large modular assembly. Yeah, like we once talked about car manufacturing. We didn't make the cars from scratch, we just assembled them here. So that's probably the first technical point. But here, the issue isn't so much about manufacturing itself as it is about the critical moment when the United States finally made the decision and moved from words to action. There's a fundamental agreement to transfer not only weapons to us, but also technology. And that's actually going to be very significant. Because, by the way, whether anyone noticed or not, there are actually 3 stages involved. It all starts with stingers, meaning the smaller ones. The production capabilities will be transferred to European countries. Then comes the production of interceptor missiles for air defense as well, medium range ones. And after that, you get to the missiles. More powerful ones like Patriot, PAC-2, PAC-3, which are the last line of defense against ballistic missiles. So this whole range, which used to be handled by the United States themselves and partly by Japan, now all of this is being opened up and transferred to partners. And yes, of course, it will all still be controlled by the United States, but at least now there's an understanding that they're not putting up a barrier, like we just won't give it to you, period. And I think that after these technologies, other opportunities will follow. For example, right now we're already producing armored vehicles on Ukrainian territory. We're basically manufacturing them under their licenses. And there are a lot of repair operations that used to be handled by the United States. So, step by step, we're becoming part of their technological chains. And these chains show them that not only are we capable, but we adapt and learn very quickly. So, if you look at what Western analysts are writing, I think if you multiply all that by 1.5 or 2, then I believe the timelines can really be shortened. With this kind of technology, why? Because we ourselves understand when they gave us 2 or 3 weeks and then predicted the collapse of Ukraine. But here we are, standing strong for the fifth year and not planning to fall apart anytime soon. That just doesn't fit into the analytical models they imagine over there. So they can say what they want, but how things will actually turn out in Ukraine, we'll see.
Tell me, what do you think? Does Donald Trump have any interest in this? In the United States of America to expand this production?
If it's under license, we'll still have to pay for the licensing anyway.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Viktor Nikolaevich. If your production lines are overloaded and you can't keep up, then give us the technology, give us the licenses. Of course, there would be the strictest control, as you mentioned, but you would be scaling up your presence. And on the European continent, people are already making very good money from this.
Basically, it would be their production just on our territory and with our people. So nothing really changes. We're just truly scaling up production. If they can't produce more missiles than what we're seeing now, and the most interesting thing is that they don't have enough of these missiles. They use them a bit differently, roughly speaking, in the Middle East. They realize that it's not really right to use very expensive missiles against some kind of shahheads or imitators. And basically, the money just went down the drain. But what if you do all this properly and cover everything? Not only not only Ukraine's needs, but also Europe's and the Middle East's needs, this is only a plus for the United States. We're not even talking about Israel yet, which has also been trying for more than a year now. What are they trying to get there? They haven't received anything under the licenses, but now there's an opportunity for them to scale all these things up as well. That's why such technology sharing is beneficial for everyone. I wouldn't rule out that this is happening because maybe the United States already has some other generation. Well, it does exist, we know about it, but it's very expensive and extremely difficult to produce. But there are already more advanced types of weapons, which we will also gradually start looking into to see if maybe we can somehow participate there as well. But that's probably not for now, but for the next stage, a more distant prospect.
Viktor Nikolaevich, if we're talking about long range strikes, long range sanctions that Ukraine is implementing against Russia, then please tell me your opinion. I'd like you to comment and share your position regarding the statements made by Czech President Petr Pavel, who said that Ukraine has maybe just a couple of months before Putin. After the so called elections, he will still go for this large scale mobilization. Yes, this time needs to be used wisely in order to really push Russia toward concrete negotiations. So, in your opinion, does this time gap really have any real basis? What do you think?
Well, all the experts agree that if this does start, then it will start. Somewhere at the end of October, beginning of November. It's important to understand that at the same time, there's also a problem, an economic problem in Russia, and they want to manage before a possible collapse to at least present something to their population as some kind of victory, some priorities that have been achieved. I don't know. I'm not sure they'll succeed at anything. They've set a deadline there until the end of the year. They absolutely have to reach the borders of their so called constitutional ambitions. That is, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. Well, as for Luhansk region, okay, that's one thing. But there are questions about Donetsk, and as for Kherson and Zaporizhia, we definitely aren't planning to give those up to anyone. So any issues they try to raise there, and any attempt at serious mobilization could stir up Russia in a very serious way. Some protest movements might arise not because of political demands, but specifically due to economic reasons. That's when the fridge really starts to beat the TV. When the TV says one thing, but people see something else, and when they open the fridge, they see it's empty. So, this is the moment when they manage to carry out the mobilization before this moment comes and use these people to solve their very narrow, urgent issues at the front? Or will they not make it in time? Or will an economic collapse actually start much sooner than they can hold these elections and deploy? But I still agree with many experts who say that mobilization might also not lead to what they are aiming for. They can still throw more bodies at it to some extent, but when they move out into open fields and try to solve their issues there, all their local assaults just collapse. In populated areas, yes, they can sometimes slip through and seize the initiative. But outside of populated areas, all their support just smashes headfirst against our drone systems. That's why people say it's still up in the air, where there will be victory and where there will be defeat.
Viktor Nikolaevich, thank you very much for the conversation and for this analysis. You're watching Freedom TV channel. Thank you. Victoria Gunn, military and public figure, Major General retired of the Security Service of Ukraine, Deputy Head of the Security Service in 2014 to 2015, and also Director of the Security Sector Reform Agency.